Okay, share this. And we are off and running. So if people join us, we will let them in and they'll be able to catch up from the recording later on. So thank you for those of you who have joined in person, or if you're watching on the YouTube channel later. My name is Carly Wharton, and I run a practice called Owning Authenticity. As part of what I do, natal charts play a huge role in not only my understanding of who I truly am, but the work that I do with other people that helps them connect with who they truly are. We have one more friend joining us. Okay, so this is an AstroBeginners event. So my goal with AstroBeginners is always to speak to a beginner level. So introducing vocabulary words. So if you are, not new to astrology, I apologize for being this beginner, but I find it makes it accessible for just anybody who wants to tune in and get a little bit of clarity on themselves. I've never done, hang on just a second, Scooby, no. No. Thank you. The dog, and she's got the bone. I've never done the Earth Energy family before. So this is a first for this particular session. We'll go through Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, which are the 3 Earth signs, and introduce their houses and planets. We'll get into all of those good things. But in the interest of keeping this on a beginner level, I want to introduce 2 terms that are going to serve us throughout the rest of this conversation. So the first is archetypes. So what do I mean when we're going to spend the whole 2 hours talking about archetypes? So what is that? Imagine facets on a diamond. Even if it's an uncut diamond, raw diamonds still have different sides to them. And we as humans probably look a lot more like a raw diamond than what you see here on the screen, but it's all the same. So the different sides of the diamond, they're technically all diamond, but they have their own unique properties, especially when you think about a raw diamond. Some are bigger, some are smoother, so they're different. They have different properties. But a diamond in and of itself can't exist with only one facet. That doesn't make sense in a physical way. It naturally has all these different sides. So we humans have all of these different sides to the way our energy is wired, let's say. And all of those different sides of our personality are archetypes or sides on this diamond. So the thing about archetypes is that they are inherent in all of us. So the thing that I love about studying archetypes is that, if you can find this same need, this same primal need to connect with other people, for example, that's an archetype that we're going to talk about today. It's inherent inside all of us. So there's unity in archetypes. There's being able to see yourself in other people, which naturally breeds compassion and unconditional love and all kinds of good things that come from unifying us, finding common ground. These archetypes are things that we all share. Granted, we all express them very differently. And that's where putting your unique chart together is a lifelong process, probably. But hacking into the archetypes is a huge step to get us there. The evolutionary astrology approach. So in astrology, there are tons of different ways to slice and dice and try to interpret the information for a whole host of reasons. Evolutionary astrology is just one facet of that. And these are some of the basic premises of looking at astrology through this evolutionary lens. So it assumes that we are here for a reason. Our soul was very much in control when it chose to come and have the life as Carly Wharton or as Aiden or as whoever you are. We chose our birth time, meaning we basically chose our particular natal chart and our unique energy to suit our soul's mission. We knew ahead of time what we were coming to do, so we loaded up the toolbox with all the perfect tools to allow us to successfully accomplish our soul mission. This is probably my favorite one because this is such an antidote to a lot of things that you hear out there about bad placements or hard placements, or, you know, the hardest placement in a natal chart. Like there's horror stories about how unfortunate you are with certain placements. And in evolutionary astrology, it assumes that every single piece of your natal chart is perfect for the evolutionary path that you intended to walk. So if you feel at all like, I'm going to use an example, Mercury in Pisces is like classic, a bad combo. The outward presentation is often misunderstood. But at the same time, like that inability to be readily understood, it serves its purpose also. You know, it probably directs the user back inward towards a path of understanding themselves, getting clear on the inside, because getting clear with people on the outside isn't working. So there's no bad placement, it's just a possible redirection. But I love putting that spin on it because we really are blessed by every single part of our chart, I think. Evolutionary astrology in general, it aims at why you chose the placements you did, like getting out from under any victim mentality around our chart to say, you have these tools, you chose to bring them with you. So what purpose did you think that they were going to solve or serve? Because they absolutely have their role to play. Obviously, all of this is really rooted in the idea of reincarnation and our soul's eternal journey. So, in and out of various lifetimes, each time we come forward under a unique natal chart, we have a reason. We have a reason for doing that. So, it's about understanding, what did you mean this time? And how do you line up with that? Because fast forwarding to the end of why would you want to line up with why you came here, it's satisfying on a soul level to do what your soul was born to do. Um, like sitting in this session right now. I mean, these kinds of sessions are something that I feel like I was somewhat born to do. It's like teach things that I'm passionate about. I feel alive sitting in this session. That's why I offer it for free, because it's fun. So it's like that. It's like there's joy in lining up with who your soul intended for you to be. Any questions on these two pieces before we jump into the actual archetypes, the meat of what we're going to talk about? Something in the chat.
No, it's fascinating. I don't have any questions.
Okay, cool. I did get a direct message from another attendee saying that the sound cut out. So can you hear me still, Aiden?
Yes, I sure
Yeah,
can.
okay. Moon, let me know if it's still not working, and the solution might be to you leave the Zoom and come back, might fix
Oh,
it.
okay.
So yeah, try that if it's still,
I can do that.
if
Do you
it
want me to
cuts
do
out
it?
on you. No, I think we're good to continue if you can hear me.
I can.
Okay, so yeah, we'll keep going and she's gonna leave and come back. Perfect. Okay, so this guy, Stephen Forrest, StephenForrestAstrology.com. He is an evolutionary astrologer, and he wrote this entire element series that you see on the screen, presenting the astrological archetypes that are part of this interpreting natal chart family. Like, you need to understand all of these different archetypes. And so he broke it down into these 4 books that are sorted by element. And the Book of Earth, Making It Real, is let me move back. There we go. The Book of Earth is what I've taken and absorbed and then repackaged into this presentation. So the thing about this book is, I can tell you it's probably not meant for like brand new beginners. He has a lot of years under his belt, and he's very fun to listen to, I think, but he does assume that you have a certain vocabulary. It's hard to listen to if you don't have a lot of astrological vocabulary yet. But that's my goal here, is to repackage it in a way that is super easy to understand, even if you're a brand new beginner. So what's included in that book, which I think if you listen to it on Audible like I did, it's like 18 hours long. So for me to try to boil it down into 2 hours, like obviously these are just the highlights. And if you like it, I would highly recommend you check that out. You can also buy it like in hardback version, obviously, as well. So the three signs, Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, those are the three earth signs. So those are kind of the big headers that we're going to spend time on today, are those three clans of kind of family members, archetypes, those three groups of archetypes that we're going to spend time talking about. The planets that rule them, the houses that they occupy on the natal chart wheel. Again, if you don't have a good understanding of the natal chart wheel itself, that's really okay. I would say kind of let that part go a little bit and try to focus just into the personality behavior side of what we're going to talk about, because I do think that it'll resonate even if you don't have a whole lot of natal chart background. Real quick, before we dive in, I do want to spend just a minute talking about the difference between planets, signs, and houses. And a lot of this, again, comes from Stephen Forrest. So starting with planets, let's imagine planets as different kinds of meat. So there's chicken, there's fish, there's beef, there's pork, there's all these different kinds of meat. Now, let's say you took some ground beef, which is what it is, it's ground beef, but you seasoned it with taco seasoning, or you took some ground beef and you turned it into meatloaf. So at the end, when you eat the ground beef, it's two very different experiences because it's been flavored. And the way you flavor something matters a lot. So the flavoring is the signs. So the planet is what it is, and then you put it in the sign where you have it in your natal chart, and that dumps a bunch of flavor all over that planet. So that's the first connection, is like you have the planet in a certain sign. And then you have that planet sign combo in a house. So houses are the behavior side, the actual action, the doing of it. And I think as we break down the archetypes for like the Taurus clan, for example, Taurus is ruled by Venus and it all occupies that second house. They're not necessarily interchangeable. It's not like it's all the same thing, Taurus, Venus, second house, but they do overlap a lot, and they'll tell a slightly different side of the story as you take the planet, flavor it with the sign, and then you demonstrate it through the house, if that makes sense. So that's why we're going to go through all of them individually and try to show how they really are unique and not necessarily just all synonyms for the same thing. Okay, so spirit and flesh, this is where he starts in the book of Earth, and I think it's a fascinating place to contemplate because basically we have our soul inside this vehicle, or our body, if you want to call it that, this avatar suit that we occupy while we're here. So we have these two pieces of us that basically, as he describes it, you go back and forth, like the pursuits of the spirit often aren't in line with what the flesh wants, and the pursuits of the flesh often take you away from the pursuits of the spirit. So they tend to be at odds with each other, and yet the goal of being here physically is to bring all of it forward in a way that feels successful to you, however you identify that. Basically bringing that golden city of perfection, meaning the spirit, and like what we can imagine on the inside, what we can see in our dream state, this ideal of how amazing the world could be, right? Like it's easy to go there mentally, but then bringing that and like actually manifesting it in the earth realm, in the physical. That's where you make it real. You make it actually matters when you ground it down into something that physically exists, that of everyone in the whole world can see this same creation that's been created. When you leave things in the spirit, you're depending on people's spiritual senses to be able to perceive what you've created. So that's where making it in the physical does make it so much more powerful. So spirit's role in that is to make a stand, like point you in the right direction. And then your flesh, your reality of the physical situation is that there are limitations to what you can create. There are limitations to how many hours there are in the day, how fast you can move around the physical planet. There's a million different ways that we're limited. And we haven't even started talking about money or like actual resources to get things done. So it's a very interesting pursuit to try to take the ideal of perfection and build it into reality where maybe perfection doesn't even really exist. So the idea here is that perfect is the enemy of good enough. Like if we are constantly striving for perfection, we're missing out on a lot of opportunities to move forward, to be better than we were. Still not perfect, but better. So perfect is an interesting idea that we are going to spend some time revisiting as we go through each of the different archetypes here. So the thing about it is, like, this is a quote: any landing you can walk away from is a good landing. Um, is it though? Right? Like, if the pilot like skids it in on the runway and like it bumps and the plane turns over, but you lived, you walked away, is that really a good landing? Like, where are our standards really? Like, we're getting into the earth energy realm of like, here's perfect, something that's probably unachievable, but we do get to practically decide every day, all day long, what is good enough. So any landing you can walk away from as a good landing, that's a pretty loose version of good enough, I would say. And most people probably have something much higher. Some people are holding to perfection. They are paralyzing themselves in their now because perfection is not possible. So they're just quitting. They're just opting out of even trying. So it's about finding the balance and what you can live with and all of that. It's going to be a unique experience for everybody. Basically, the bottom line is imperfection is just part of making anything a reality. So getting good at being okay with imperfection, that's kind of part of doing something real with our earth energy, manifesting anything that we want to. So like all energies, this is not to shine an unfair dark light on earth energy. Every single element has its high expression and its low expression. So in its highest form, earth energy is how we make spirit visible. It's how you take a creative vision from your mind and your imagination and your thoughts, and you turn it into something that exists in the physical that other people can witness, they can touch it, they can smell it, they can taste it. It's making your spirit have like real form. And that transformation, don't even get me started on how magical that transformation is, to take that inspiration that you feel in your heart and create something that somebody else can feel it in their heart. So that is so cool to me. In its dark side, though, earth energy beings, they're caught in that cycle of perfection. They're so committed to perfect that they're blocked, that they can't do anything because they can't get to the perfect place. Also, real life, overly practical, of so caught up in all the details and all the concerns of this earthly realm. And now they have no more time to imagine and to be inspired and to connect to what it is that you're even trying to bring into the earth realm, connecting back to your why. Because on its highest frequency, it is very much about what your spirit wants from you. So, earth energy, it's easy to think that we're only talking about the physical, but if you've lost touch with your spirit, I think at one point he uses the phrase unguided missile, like earth energy is powerful, but if you don't have it connected back to something that you actually believe in, you could spend a lot of energy creating something that you don't even care about, you don't even like. Like, that's kind of where burnout comes from, is that you've applied all of your energy to something that did not pay you back like you thought it would. And that's where earth energy can get tricky. So constantly coming back to, why am I doing this? Why am I really doing this? And getting clear on the spirit side of it definitely helps avoid the common fallout with earth energy, which we'll talk more in detail as we go through each archetype. So basically the earth is a spiritual playground. It's where you get to create growth and expansion inside of yourself and then manifest it on the outside. So again, that transformation, truly magical. And the more earth planets you're carrying, the more of a physical impact you're here to make. Like a real world, tangible, see it, hear it, smell it, taste it, touch it impact on this world. If you don't have any earth planets, that doesn't mean that you won't leave a mark, for reasons we can get more into later. We all, obviously, if we have physical form, you naturally send ripple effects out into the world. You can't help it. But with those earth planets, it's just magnified in the potential of how many people you're bound to ripple out to. So yeah, that's it. I did. Okay. So earth energy signs. Again, they're not all interchangeable. Yes, they all share a common idea of practicality in the real world. They're very concerned with the physical reality of things. But they're looking at it very differently. They're, again, not interchangeable at all. So Taurus is like literally our animal instinct. Like he talks a lot about our nose that has been guided through thousands or however many years of evolution and survival instincts and connecting to being able to smell something and having that like literally save your life, or being able to smell your soulmate because they are putting off the pheromones that are telling you about the connection that you share. Yada, yada, yada. Like our animal instincts play a really huge role in our daily life, whether we realize it or not. And that really is that piece of connecting back to what your spirit wants. So it is your animal instinct that knows. It's not your head. It's not your reasoning, logical process of trying to figure out how am I going to make the most money? How am I going to write the most successful book? It's like listening to the whispers of your soul and letting that point you in a certain direction and then giving it your everything, committing to it wholeheartedly. That's where Virgo comes into the mix. Virgo is there with a pad and a pen and ready to take down a list of all of the things that we really need to do, all the details that have to come together if we're going to do whatever it is Taurus has set its sights on. Virgo is where we get into like learning all of the detailed skills, mastering all of the things that are technical, like technical meaning it's not an instinctual process. Taurus is the realm of instincts. Virgo is the realm of somebody taught you how to do that. Like there's no way around it, like computer programming or electrical work, or, like you don't want to go messing around with a live electrical unit if you haven't been trained. Virgo is the energy where we learn how to be good at those technical skills. And then Capricorn is like the engine behind all of it. It's the knowing and the commitment that we really made before we even got here to have a great work. There is this drive to like leave a mark on the world. And that's a side of ourselves that this is where, archetypes get really interesting. Probably as I described these three, you resonated with one or two of them more than maybe one or two of them. Like there were some that sounded more like more of the thoughts that are playing in your mind more regularly. But all of us have all of them. We all have animal instincts. We all have skills that we've learned how to do. And we all have, at the end of the day, a desire to leave our mark on this world, whatever shape that might be. He emphasizes greatly, and I think it's important here too, that our great work doesn't necessarily have to be a business or a job or a book or anything like that. It could be raising a sane child who goes on to make their own impact. It could be so many things. Gardening and selling your fruit or giving away your fruits and vegetables to people in your area who need it. Like that's great work. And probably nobody's going to pay you. Nobody's going to recognize that, but you're still doing it. You're still making an impact. So this is an example to kind of ground it one step further for the three of them and how they work together. And here we'll start on the Capricorn side. So Capricorn is determined to climb a mountain, to do something great. And, insert in mountain, whatever it is that you think of as your great work. Capricorn is the will to do that. And they say without the other two, Capricorn is climbing the wrong mountain and Capricorn is falling off the mountain, because Virgo is who knows how to climb it. Virgo is the one that gets the books and studies and reads up on, which carabiners are the most safe, and gets a guide and a mentor who can teach you kind of the inside version of here's what it's actually going to be like as you scale this thousands of feet mountain. Virgo is the one making sure that you have the right tools when it comes down to needing the right tools. And then Taurus is the one naming which mountain is right for you, which mountain is worthy of you. When you think about the earth, I mean, even just in the mountain climbing analogy, there are so many mountains that you could possibly climb, too many to ever climb in your lifetime, in this physical lifetime. So there's going to be some prioritization, some like which one is the first one that I want to do, and then which one do I want to do after that. Taurus is the one making those decisions. Without Taurus, that animal instinct on which mountain to move on, Capricorn gets to the top of the mountain, Virgo helped you get there, and at the top of the mountain, it's empty. It's not satisfying. You realize when you get to the top that this isn't the right mountain. And I just spent years maybe of my life getting to this top of this mountain, and it's not the right one. Gosh darn it. And I'm not going to get that time back. So making sure that you are checking in with the animal instinct at the beginning is a necessary component for Virgo's technical know-how and Capricorn's destiny of like creating this giant impact. Okay. All good to keep trucking here into Taurus territory. Seems like it. Okay. So again, reminder, we are taking basically all of these ideas come from the Book of Earth by Stephen Forrest. So these next few archetypes that we'll go through, Taurus, Venus, and the second house. And these are the Taurus clan. So Venus rules Taurus and Taurus rules the second house, if you're familiar. So the thing about Taurus, and this is again straight from the book, he describes that when he teaches in his astrology classes about the 12 zodiac signs, that he gets the most questions about Taurus, he thinks not because it's too complicated to understand, but because it's too simple. And we try to get meaning out of it. And really the simplicity of Taurus is that it is our pure being. When we think about our animal instincts, it's a simple knowing that we have in our bones. It's not anything that we figure out in our brains. So when we try to learn Taurus with our brains, a lot of times we overshoot and we miss the mark of Taurus is literally just like observing a breath, like empty mind, just being present in your moment. And in today's fast-paced world where we have our phone and, instant access to everything, Taurus energy of like still presence can be really hard to come by. So making sure that we carve that out, and through that quiet, through that inner silence, that's how we hear our animal instincts. That's how we hear or witness a vision or get the name of it dropped in our brains, something of which mountain is worthy of you to climb it. It's through that inner stillness that we find that answer. It's not something that we can run our wheels and think about it and try to sort it out. It's when we embody calm, and that is when that answer rises up from inside us. It's almost like that calm opens an awareness to listen to what that animal instinct is probably saying all along, but the voice is very quiet, and we have to get quiet to be able to let it be heard. Wisdom foot, peace foot, this brings Scorpio into the mix. So every single set of signs that are across from each other are called sister signs. Taurus's sister sign is Scorpio because they're across from each other in the zodiac wheel. And Taurus represents the peace foot, and Scorpio represents the wisdom foot. So he tells a story like, imagine a wise old man walking along a path. His left foot is called wisdom, and his right foot is called peace. And as he moves along the path, in order to get his wisdom foot forward, you must ground your peace foot and be there on your peace foot. And that is how you move your wisdom foot forward. And from there, how you get your peace foot forward is you ground into your wisdom foot and let that peace foot move forward. So it's like a back and forth, a back and forth. He says, ask 10 people how they found wisdom in their lives, and you'll hear 8 or 9 at least sad stories, because wisdom comes from hard life experiences. It comes from loss. It comes from things blowing up in our faces. And, we got burned, and that's how we learned. That's how we gained our wisdom. So through those hard experiences that yield wisdom, which we're grateful for, it's like the last thing that you need right after that is another hard experience. Like once you've gotten your wisdom foot forward, it's time to ground into that and move your peace foot, move into a peaceful moment. So he said, like, if you have heavy Taurus energy in your chart, so that's to say either like a planet or two, or a lot of planets maybe, or one of the axes, like you have your rising sign or your midheaven, you have something anchoring you in that Taurus energy, your whole life, your whole lifetime of like this incarnation of your soul is trying to get your peace foot forward. Like you got your wisdom foot forward last time. And that means that there was likely a trauma of some sort. You lived through something very difficult. Your soul grew and evolved, and you got all this wisdom. That's fantastic. And now this lifetime with your heavy Taurus energy is about recentering and finding stillness, finding homeostasis of like balance and ease and serenity and inner peace. So Taurus is really, it's like become my favorite. It was the back runner for the longest time because it was boring, which it totally is. But that simplicity and that inner stillness, it's where our voice, our inner voice, can truly talk to us. So it's an art form. Most of these archetypes are. A little bit about more the animal instincts side. How he takes you through this is asking, what is your favorite animal? And this is something where, like, if nothing pops to mind, that's fine, but maybe an exercise of contemplation for later is like, what's your favorite animal? And then take it one step further to what is the natural habitat for that animal? So if it's, a dolphin out in the open ocean is the natural habitat. If it's an eagle, then up on top of the world looking down, or like at the top of a mountain, is the natural habitat. So basically, like, find that favorite animal that you resonate with, and you go to that animal's natural habitat. And it's supposed to be very healing and calm inducing for you to connect with that space, and that it's supposed to let your animal instinct bubble up more. For me personally, as I was listening to that, my favorite animal or my spirit animal is like a house cat. So like being in my house for long extended periods of time is that natural habitat. And I can vouch that that is very healing and very soothing to bringing my Taurus energy forward. Like, I don't know that it's something that we can do a whole lot on purpose, or if it's something that we more allow. We allow peace to come into our lives. We allow stillness to be there. We allow ourselves freedom from constant mental chatter that may or may not need to be there. It's like when you're showering or driving your car, like, what's going on in your consciousness? Are you making a mental list of all the things that you need to do? Or are you breathing and looking at the changing leaves on the trees and appreciating the fall colors and, immersing yourself in that present moment and the beauty that's always surrounding us? That's the Taurus side of allowing there to be stillness. Taurus is always associated with our 5 senses. So Like that's how we know it in our bones, is because we smelled it, we can taste it, we can hear it, we can, like, my hearing, for example, like all of our five senses have the ability to be kind of hooked up to our psychic awarenesses. For me, my ears are very sensitive to people's energy. Like I can read their emotions through their voice, whether they're talking about their emotions or not. And a lot of people can do that and may or may not think of it as like a psychic awareness, but I personally have put it in that category. But it's like through my ears, I can judge and make assessments, and I know it in my bones when someone's lying, when someone is hurt and they're not owning up to it, or whatever it is. I can feel it and I know it to be true, and those are our animal instincts, letting our five senses work kind of in a subconscious space and then spit out a knowing. So we may not always know why we think what we think or what our animal instincts are telling us. And the advice here is to don't second guess those animal instincts, right? Like it's the animal instinct is telling us the right way, but if it doesn't make logical sense, we don't always follow it. And then we end up climbing a mountain that's not ours to climb. So we can easily overcomplicate our animal instincts. Be quiet to witness the mountain that's worthy of you. Uh, Eat when you're hungry, sleep when you're tired. Like that's essential animal instinct side of Taurus. Like you think about a house cat that, like my house cats, they come and they get like 2 bites of food at a time. And they do that like 12 times a day. And it's like that. It's like they don't need to sit down for a whole meal. They just like get one little bite. Yep, that's all I needed. And then they go spend 2 minutes circling back around the bed and trying to find the exact angle where their body's going to be the most comfortable. It's like that. It's like just let your body do what it will naturally do. And that's Taurus. So when we try to mentally understand Taurus, it gets really complicated and that misses the whole point. The last piece of this is hugs. So like little kids, when they're emotional, they naturally instinctively reach out to their parents for physical contact. And as we grow up and society's boundaries and all of these things come into play, we learn that people have physical space issues and you should not touch them or whatever. But hugs are something that like our animal side reaches out for physical contact whenever it's needed. Like our instincts know when we're needing to connect with another being, whether that's a pet or a partner or whatever. Physical contact is very important to this Taurus energy and that inner stillness. There's something about making that connection with another being that it lets you achieve a greater level of inner stillness. There's like a peacefulness that comes when that's like hooking up happens. And we don't need to mentally understand how or why or whatever, but like hold the dog or give your partner a hug or whatever, it really does make a difference. And that physical contact plays a big role here in Taurus. Okay, so Venus. Venus is often the planet of love, which is not untrue. It's basically the urge to connect with another, again, whether that's a partner, pet, friend, or whatever. But the part that I find more helpful in thinking about is Venus represents our values, our like, not necessarily like love itself, but how we love and why we love and what we're looking for in love. And it's like, do you value freedom? Do you value stability? Do you value, I mean, there's so many different things that you could personally value that are going to make how you go about basically making any decision, it's going to be different. So our Venus placement tells us a lot about the things that we value and the way that we are looking to connect with others. She's also the goddess of the arts and beauty. So when we think about like, this is kind of where Taurus and Venus connect, like there's something about immersing ourselves in beauty that creates that sense of inner stillness and inner quiet, where we're just looking at a pretty painting or we're listening to music or however we're immersing ourselves in the beauty of the present moment, it's an inner silence that is able to see the world in a different way than when you're thinking and you're in your head and you're analyzing. That outlook is so different from a simple open awareness of beauty. So Venus can tell us a lot too about the kinds of beauty that we are drawn to and that will be especially restorative for us if we immerse ourselves in. When we do our Venus right, it leads to inner peace, which if that's something that you're into, you want to practice inner peace, Venus is a planet in your natal chart that you can learn about, like what sign it's in, what house it's in, what aspects is it making to other planets in your chart. Because when you're actively engaging in your Venus in the right way, you will feel content and peaceful. And if you don't feel content and peaceful, chances are there's something in your Venus that you're not bringing into the balance. And without looking at everybody's individual natal chart, that's basically as far as we can take that part of the conversation. It's how we personally get right with the world. So this is where it also gets really interesting, because there are things that society as a whole values, and then there's the individual. And what happens when your values are different from the values of society and what's society like socially acceptable? It can be so tempting for people to blindly follow along with what society wants. And when you do that and you don't look into your deeper value system, your unique Venus, chances are it basically puts you at odds with the world. It's a hollow existence of you following somebody else's recipe when it might be difficult to embrace values openly that contradict with other people's. Like think about like homosexuality or just like any kind of like not mainstream values, however they came through history. The people who openly embraced their value system, even though it so flagrantly went in the face of society, those people were following their values, their Venus placement. And on the inside, there was inner peace because maybe they were being rejected by the world at large or society or whatever. But they were following their own true north. Their own value system was being appeased, and therefore their soul was getting to act out the values that they brought forth. We have to, like, in order to find your true Venus expression, chances are part of it is going to include going against something that you think is like expected of you. Like, this is the value of society, I have to live up to this. And then the further you get into your like exploring your Venus path, it's usually like, okay, well, I can't do this because that's what you want, that's not what I want, so I have to go over here and do what I want to do. And that's where things, that's why it's called evolution, right? Like, we get outside our comfort zone and we do things that maybe make us really uncomfortable, but they're true to who we are, and that yields an inner peace that's real. And that right there is worth, I don't know, like, I guess it depends probably on the rest of your chart if that's worth more than being accepted by society or not. It's probably a personal choice there. Venus, like being right with the world, like naturally that kind of is that same idea as balance, like an inner balance. And again, you can't follow society's recipe and find inner balance. So Venus is another place that you can look for cues to help find that. I like this part that we don't find love, we learn to recognize it. And this I especially like to include because as a person who offers one-on-one readings to people, questions about when I'll find my next relationship are very common, very high up on people's priorities when they're single, which is understandable because Venus, like where we started, is the urge to connect with other people. So this part right here is key to this process, though, of like our truest loves will find us when we are following our Venus path. When we are aligned with our values, when we are aligned with our soul's inherent worth, we are valuing ourselves, we're loving ourselves, true love finds us. And we just have to recognize the person that's standing right in front of us. And that's an internal process. And most people looking for love don't want to hear that, but I'm going to include it right here anyway. Depression in the Venus archetype comes from loneliness. So again, if you're feeling lonely, chances are your Venus path is out of balance, and there's something there that could be tweaked inside of yourself that could help you find more contentness and inner peace in the moment. And again, love finds you, external love finds you when love is taken care of on the inside. Second house. Okay. So the second house is often referred to as the house of money. But again, we're going to keep that kind of broken down to more practical understanding that it's really more about security. And with that, security has a completely different meaning to everybody depending on what your value system looks like. Like I said, if you value adventure, your life, your approach to money is probably very different than if you value stability. Like one path is going to lead you to like make a little money, spend it on adventure, make a little money, spend it on adventure. The other path is like you've got $4 million in retirement accounts at age 35 because you're really covered for the future. So depending on what's going on in your second house, what values you have, your definition of security is very different, and your approach towards money then is very different. So this is again where it gets really fun to kind of step away from society and make it personal, because society as a whole has a thing for money, very popular, lots of people like it, most people want it, because if we really boil it down, money buys things that we need. So to a certain extent, money's necessary, even though money itself isn't necessary. What's necessary is survival. What's necessary is at a certain point comforts. Like you could live in a tent and be fine, but it's much more comfortable to have a house that is more sturdy and will protect you more readily from the elements. Money also buys complications. When you have a lot of money, it's complicated. It can also buy insecurity, because when you have a lot of money, you worry about losing it. You have no money, you don't worry about losing your money. So just because you have a big pile of money doesn't necessarily mean that you feel inner peace. That's a path I had to walk for myself. I just knew that when I have a big pile of money, I will feel better. And it's not true. It wasn't for me. You live your life however you need to. But at the same time, money does buy peace eventually, because being poor or homeless or without food is very stressful. It's very stressful on your day-to-day, moment-to-moment experience. So there is such thing as not enough money. Like you don't have enough to buy the basic human things that you need. There is also such a thing as too much money. This is getting into the space of greed and needlessly hoarding and consuming and withholding things that you could easily give to someone who truly needs it. But there's an insecurity around, I don't have enough, and that kind of bottomless pit, like it's just never enough. And that, I think, is what greed is. So this idea of you need a certain amount of money to be comfortable and feel that inner stillness and peace, but once you get to a certain point, it's pulling, like, more money isn't always the answer, basically. Which feels, again, like something I was born to talk about, how money is not the end all be all of what we're here for. And finding the true value of security feels really important for me personally in my journey. And so here, we put it here. The basic driving force of the second house, and again, this is where understanding everything going on in your second house is really important, because the second house is where we're hungry. Like we want something, we want what we value. And that's a natural dynamic inside us all. But we each have unique value systems. So what is it that you're hungry for is very different in the adventure versus stability model. but we're driven either way. So again, if we're not lining up with our unique value system and getting on that path for ourselves, it puts us at odds with the universe, love, resources, any of those things. Like, we just have a hard time attaining them because we're not on the path that we intended to walk. And when we get on the path that we intended to walk, things start lining up for us. So a huge part of that is knowing what you value. And I know for me, from my experience, money was like right there at the top of the list. And now looking back, it's like that was, I perceived it as a means to an end. I thought it bought happiness, essentially. And it didn't in the end. I was standing on top of that mountain and there was no happiness there. I spent all these years climbing up there to get to the happiness, and then it wasn't there. And I was really irritated, but I won't make that mistake again, because there's so many deeper things beyond what you think money is going to get you. So taking money out of the equation and skipping straight to, if you want happiness, then like cultivate happiness on a daily basis. Don't worry so much about making money. Like, it realigns your whole behavior towards your life when you get clear on your value system. So inner peace is the reward of being right with our money. So how much money you need, again, depends on the story your second house is telling. So this is like, who is more right with their money? In the first example, this person makes $50,000 a year. In the second example, they make $1 million a year. But one is living a $45,000 lifestyle, that's $5,000 surplus, and the other is living a $1.2 million lifestyle. So a huge deficit, huge. So like debt and interest charges and yikes, like where are you going with that? So the second person is not right with their money. They are living out of balance in their world. So listening to him give that example, it prompted me to go through, like, how much does my cost of living cost at this point? And how much does my income add up to at this point? And where's my balance point? Which, again, just for contemplation's sake, just to see, like, being right with our money. If you're living a $30,000 lifestyle, I mean, maybe you can work part-time and make enough money to pay for your lifestyle, meanwhile giving yourself 5 days a week free to do whatever else it is that you need. People assume often that you have to work full-time to like make a living. But if the living that you're doing is downsized to the point where it only costs $20,000, $30,000 a year, making a living might only take you a couple days a week. So it's those kinds of things that, again, as we get into a person's unique value system, it's very interesting to see where we all fall on that spectrum. So this is another, like, getting deeper into your personal values. What is the right way to make your money? So you might be a person who has a real big thing for money, but you draw the line at being a hitman to become a millionaire. Like, you don't like money that much. You're not willing to cross that line. That's your value system in action. This is an extreme example, but minimal examples happen all day, every day. The other one is sex work a valid profession? I watched a documentary on this recently, so it was right there at the top of my mind, but I think it's a perfect example of understanding what's going on in your second house could probably allow me to somewhat predict how you would answer that question. Some people would say, yes, and I'm doing it, and I like it like this. Other people would say, it should be illegal. It's a crime. It's wrong. Other people would say, I don't care what they do. It's not my body, but I would never do it for myself. It's like all of these different values shape how we approach not only our money, but other people and their values. And it's all an exercise in contemplation. We'll call it that, a lifelong one at that. So that is Taurus. And we will move straight into Virgo unless there are any questions. Very good.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Have you experienced in your readings that a near-death experience or a near-death type of experience could change the second house, the orientations?
That's really interesting. So off the top of my head, I don't think I've ever done a reading for someone where they talked about a near-death experience. So I don't have experience with it, but my guess is that maybe it doesn't so much change the second house, but it clarifies it, because our value system, I think, is there all along on some level, and it depends on how many distractions we're willing to pile on top of it, which keep us from living what that value system actually is. Like right now, for example, I have a value that I do want to pursue, and I am currently not letting myself, because it is taboo and like not allowed in society. Eventually I will work up the courage to live in alignment with that, but I could see how like a near-death experience would really put it into perspective to just clarify, like let go of everything that society cares about and just be in alignment with what was there all along. So, I mean, that's my guess. But like I said, I don't have any experience with that. If anybody else does, you're welcome to jump in there. Cool. Any other questions before we move ahead? Cool. I think we're doing really good on time. Okay, so Virgo. I love Virgo so much. I probably am going to say that about all three of these earth signs. Virgo, the most basic explanation of Virgo is that this is where perfection comes from, is Virgo, because in Virgo's imagination, they can see perfection. And then they open their eyes and they see reality. And that breeds what Stephen called divine discontent, which is a Virgo thing, is to like, it's never perfect enough. No matter how good you do, you could always have done better. There's always room for improvement. It's a very powerful motor for continuous improvement and growth, but that discontent can make you crazy. So it's, again, always about finding that balance point. And really the balance is to let perfection orient Virgo. So like you imagine perfection, and that's okay. Like it's good to have a vision and it's good to have a clear idea of what it is that you want to create. But the highest expression of Virgo is learning to love yourself when the reality basically never measures up. Like it just is never good enough. It's never going to be the perfection that you imagined in your mind. And that can lead to just a sourness in Virgo energy that they get a really bad rap for, which, I mean, they got that shadow side of like never being fully satisfied. Like it can make you so sour and cynical because it just is never good enough. But like when we realize that, you know, all I can do is my best, like that's kind of that highest frequency expression of Virgo, is like, I'm going to judge myself by my effort, the intensity of me putting forth my all. And if I put forth my all, then I'm satisfied. And the result and its imperfections is beside the point. It's just no longer my focus. But when I set out on a path, perfect is what I'm aiming for every single time. So letting that relationship happen, setting your sights really high and being totally okay with yourself when you don't ever meet your own expectations. This is also where Virgo can be very picky, like picking at other people, like suggestions for improvement, or they're just trying to help and just trying to offer this idea, like you could do this and it would make it better. And Virgo often gets told to shut up and get out of my face and leave me alone. And like when that's your spouse or whatever, he made the joke that like Virgos are most highly represented among the victims of spousal homicide. But like that's obviously an extreme, but Virgos, they can see perfect in their minds, and when they open their eyes and it's not there in physical reality, it takes them time in that evolutionary path to be okay with that. So like if you have heavy Virgo energy, chances are you are a recovering perfectionist. You are a recovering workaholic, probably. You're a recovering people pleaser. because all of those things are like kind of the go-to behavior for somebody with this Virgo energy of wanting to perfect, wanting to do something good in the world. They lose themselves to it. And the highest frequency of Virgo is radical self-acceptance, imperfections at all. He says, warts and all, you love yourself no matter what. Like perfect will never be a thing. So loving yourself as is the highest frequency of Virgo energy there is. Like I said, it's a huge motor for continuous improvement. I think he called it like burning evolutionary rocket fuel. Like Virgo energy is, you just never rest on your laurels. Nothing is ever good enough, literally. So you grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, which can be very productive in a lifetime. Again, if you're not making yourself crazy with torturing yourself with your imperfections. Virgo in its shadow side, like if you're struggling with that Virgo, it can be like quitting because you're overwhelmed. Like like you have a room that is totally disorganized, it's a mess, it's not clean, you've got so many things you don't even need, and instead of trying to tackle it and organize it and get it perfect, you just close the door. Just like block that off and just don't even go in there, and then live like that for 2 years. Like Virgo is just as capable of that as they are of, like in their highest form, opening the door and systematically working through getting that room cleaned up and organized. So it really does depend on like where your overall energy is, whether Virgo is helping to push you forward or it's slowly driving you insane. So that's, yeah, I got something in the chat. Oh, yes. She says yes. Virgo, yeah, Virgo is an interesting one because it's so powerful and it's so necessary in terms of the like making that leap from Taurus of setting your sights on a particular mountain and Capricorn being like all charge, all go, like I want to climb a mountain. Virgo is the connecting factor of Virgo's the one that's actually going to learn. Virgo's going to look up flights and hotels and figure out all the different pieces, all the minutia. Virgo has the capability to focus on all of these details. And the downside, somebody was explaining OCD to me the other day, but basically like so many details become so important that your brain basically like blows a fuse. Like you just snap, can't handle like more details than what your humanness can handle. That's one of those limitations of physicality. So it's about recognizing balance of like that Virgo attention to detail wants perfection. So it's going to say everything is important. Every single little detail is important, that we get it all perfect. And in the reality of things, that's not true. And if we don't check ourselves and we let it all run amok, eventually you fry yourself, because as humans, like there's only so much of that we can do. That's why Taurus and that inner stillness and that peace and quiet, observing your breath, like that's a real part of maintaining that balance. We talked about judging instead by the intensity of our effort, not achieving perfection. And the highest frequency of Virgo is learning to love ourselves. And he said, like, Virgo, that is the goal. That's the evolutionary intent of Virgo energy, is learning to love ourselves. And that Virgo energy is like set up to fail the most at loving themselves because they are so painfully aware of every single imperfection, every single opportunity for improvement. They know them all, backwards, forwards, instantly recognizing all of those. And when physical reality, like, you know, even if you do meet this goal for improvement and this one and this one and 100 more, there's 5 million more that aren't done yet. And so Virgo's like, Virgo energy can't rest. So the answer to that, the antidote to that, is you literally have to disengage from your Virgo energy. Put it on like a hat, or like rain boots when it's raining. Like when you need that, put it on. And when you don't, when you're driving in your car, when you're showering, when you're laying in bed at night trying to fall asleep, go find your Taurus energy, put that hat on, put that, it's probably more like a blanket, but like put your Taurus energy on and see if you can get yourself to relax and let go of the constant need to improve things if you're somebody that has that intense Virgo energy. The other side of Virgo, and this is where, again, such a necessary archetype, it's the servant, which, as he says, like, it sounds very classist, like the servant has a low status in the society, but it's not really meant like that. It's more like, think of like a crafts person, where this person has, like an electrician or a teacher or something, somebody that has a skill that they're now serving their community with their skill. So an honest mechanic is a servant in the community because he's providing services that are of quality and he's not taking advantage of people. So being a servant can take on many forms. It basically means wanting to be of value for the world, society, your community, your household, whoever it is that is important to you. You want to make a difference, a positive difference. And again, that constant need for improvement that Virgos are so known for, it's coming from here. It's coming from wanting to make the most positive impact on the world that they possibly can, because their hearts are legit in the right spot. So like this prayer, God grant me that today I do work that matters. That is what Virgo is after. So it's not about the highest paying job. It's not about the most recognition. It's about literally making ripple effects that matter in the lives of other people. And the lives of other people is very important to Virgo. That servant mentality, or even craftsperson, it's about helping someone else. In Virgo territory, we've kind of left ourselves behind and we're now focused on making an impact in the collective. And that's where the light side of Virgo is radical self-love. The shadow side of Virgo is you have no self and you are a slave to the collective, which is not healthy either. Skill in service of other beings is the core motivation. And so that's why when they're picking at you and they're constantly telling you, you could do this better, here's an idea for improvement. When you snap at them and they say, I was only trying to help, they meant that. They really did mean it. So listening to your friends or your partner's Virgo energy is also about understanding that they're coming from a loving place. They're showing love by offering you those ideas for improvement, which doesn't always feel like that to other people, which again is part of why Virgo gets the bad rap. Virgo energy, if you have planets here, basically you've made this agreement with the universe that there is a skill in this world that you are here to learn, at least one, maybe a couple, but like not just jack of all trades kind of learn it, like master it, like be a master of this skill. And the more you discover and polish your unique skill in this world that makes you of service to the collective, that's where self-esteem comes from, that's where dignity comes from. And those things are very necessary to getting to that highest frequency of Virgo. Virgo in its early stages is very frantic because it's not grounded into its unique skill. As it develops that skill though, it has a sense of purpose, and that sense of purpose anchors it into its life. And so that's something that, like, you know, finding that and then investing in it like day by day by day. If you have heavy Virgo energy, knowing what your skill is, like, it's a critical part to reaching that high frequency of loving yourself. Let's see. To Virgo, dignity is more important than money. So like a job well done. I have heavy Virgo energy and so does my dad. And that is exactly how I think of him. Like his obsession with quality and excellence is of the utmost importance. Like he's not a charge like by the hour for what he does guy. And he will put so much time into perfecting the presentation of what he does. The functionality is all there and it's installed and it works. And then he'll spend 2 hours putting zip ties around wires so that they're like neatly organized over to the side and hidden, and it's just like polished and perfect. Virgo takes so much pride in their work. So think about like an environment where you work, where speed is all that's valued, where they don't care about quality, they're just about like how many calls can you make in an hour. Even if those calls are crap and you're treating the people on the other end of the phone like crap, if you make 100 of them, you win the prize. Virgo in that scenario is miserable because excellence is what's important. So heavy Virgo energy, give yourself the time and space to really take pride and be ready to like sign your name to something. Like Virgo is, you know, very finicky about the presentation of what they're putting out there. So if they were rushed, it just feels like they're doubting themselves, second guessing all of this, and that doesn't feel good. So if you're going to be able to take pride in your work, you should have enough time to make it how you want it to be before the world is going to see what you did. So Mercury rules Virgo. Mercury also rules Gemini, if you're familiar. So Mercury as a planet has its own multiple facets, let's say. And in this particular presentation, we're going to focus more on the Earth side of Mercury, since that's what we're talking about. So Mercury in general, though, represents data in, data out. So think speaking is often associated with Mercury, talking, communication in general, but listening is a maybe even more core ingredient to what Mercury does, because without taking in the world around you first, Mercury doesn't really have anything to say. Observing and listening and learning is the first step, and speaking and communicating and sharing is the second step. So anytime we're talking about Mercury, we're talking about listening and speaking, which is why it's how we perceive the world. So this is probably one of my favorite things ever, is this idea that like every single one of us has a filter inside our minds that tells us how to make sense of the world around us. This is why, you know, for example, I lost like 50 pounds one time and looked in the mirror and thought, how am I still fat? And it's like that. It's like that filter inside your mind. It sees the world a certain way, whether the world is that way or not. And that filter is tunable, let's say, like you can tune your filter and change it, reprogram it. Mercury is part of that filter. It's like your Mercury says a lot about the filter that you put on the world. Again, think like if you have more a penchant for adventure or more a penchant for stability, it's going to have you forming opinions on the world very differently. Lineage, he went on and on and on about lineage, as in terms of the sixth house and Mercury. We'll get to the sixth house here in a minute. But this idea of teacher student and passing skills and telling stories and mentorship and learning, transforming the student into the teacher. So going back to those skills where it's not instinct, you're going to study and you're going to learn a body of knowledge and practice that body of knowledge over a long period of time and go from apprentice to craftsperson to master. It's that progression of lineage. And then once you're master, now you're mentoring the next generation and sharing your skills, whatever it is. So your Mercury placement can talk a lot about the types of mentors that you're looking for, and also the type of mentor that you're here to be once you master the skills you came to master. So it's participating at both ends of that spectrum. Questioning assumptions. Mercury is, I mean, I think this part makes a little more sense in the Gemini side of it, but Mercury is extremely logical, in that the status quo or society's rules or authority figures or any of those kinds of things that have assumed power and status, Mercury doesn't really see those. Mercury sees what is. And so that means like asking questions, even though somebody's an authority figure, even though this thing is well established, Mercury still comes in and tries to dig and ask questions and understand the deeper roots of things, doesn't just take anything for granted. So when we think about that on the Virgo side of things, again, it speaks to a student who is highly motivated to know all the details about the subject that they've put themselves towards. So figuring out what your special skill is and then digging into it as deeply as possible, Mercury can help point us in that direction to say, what is it that you came here to master? So the master of resourcefulness, because you're seeing things as they are very clearly, you have a clear inventory, usually at all times, of what are the resources available to you. And again, because Mercury is that filter of how you see the world, depending on your Mercury placement, you can look at a pile of resources and either see them as resources or not, right? Like, I personally love to delegate. I am a huge delegator. I'm very lazy, if you want to call it that. I don't like to do things with my actual hands. I'm more of a like use my voice kind of person. So delegation works really, really well for me. And somebody else, who is more a hard worker kind of person, they look at a situation and they think, I have these two hands and I need to get done all of this pile of work. I look at that same situation and I think, well, I have this person who's good at that, and I have this person who's good at that, and I'll take that last little bit and give it to this person. And I just divide it up amongst the resources. So depending on your Mercury placement, you look at the world very differently. And studying that and getting good with your Mercury placement can be a way to increase the ease in your world, leaning into, I guess, the way you intended to perceive it, because again, all of our placements are on purpose. Mercury, because they're questioning, they don't just, it's not like a tape recorder where it's going to record what it learned and then pass on what it learns. And like this presentation is a great example of, this isn't exactly what Stephen Forrest said word for word. Like I said, that's like an 18-hour book, and this is a 2-hour presentation. It's taking what I learned from him and repackaging it and innovating the approach and the presentation in the way that I think makes the most sense, while still crediting that he gave me the bulk of this information, but I'm allowed to represent it. So that process is part of evolution, and your special skill kind of includes like, what is it that you came here to innovate and like stand on the shoulders of the people who came before you, but add your next little bit to it and then teach the next person so they can add their next little bit. So yeah. Intellectual rigor, mental discipline, and critical thinking. This is why, the example of Mercury and Pisces is said to be such a bad combo, but it's not. It just doesn't present like every other Mercury placement, because when you look at your Mercury placement, you understand like basically the inner landscape of your mind, like your thinking mind. And anytime you have it in a water sign, there's going to be a lot of emotion, a lot of symbolism, a lot of like metaphors and poetry, and like trying to boil big thoughts down into something that you can actually like say out loud. The way, I guess, like Pisces Mercury, and I don't know why I'm so drawn to that today, but it's like, I think because they get such a bad rap, but basically on the inside, their understanding and their intellection is so huge that trying to take that and put it into measly little words, it's a process that doesn't even work because the words fall short so painfully. And that leaves people thinking that Mercury in Pisces isn't all that bright because they can't communicate what's going on inside them. But that's why when they really get in alignment with that, poetry comes out and all of these beautiful ways where they take this gigantic understanding of things and use symbolism to convey its meaning, because that's really the easiest way they can put all those words at it. So I think Mercury is a very important one because it's how we communicate, it's how we connect with other people. And so often the pains in our lives come from the not connecting with other people the way that we want to. Either we don't feel understood, or we don't feel like we can express ourselves in a way where other people get us or love us. And Mercury can tell such a big part of that story. Oh, yeah, this is a good one. So Mercury being logical is basically saying too that it takes the ego out of things. Like going back to Virgo a step, Virgo is basically a student more than it's a teacher. Virgo's here to learn and master a skill. So they're constantly soaking up and improving and learning, and they're in that mode. And that's a very humble energy. That's an energy that says, I'm not as good yet as I could be. There's more stuff that I could learn. As soon as we start calling ourselves an expert, we have brought our ego into the picture, and we're no longer open to downloading more information. So there's an openness in Virgo that is always willing to learn the next thing. And there's a balance in that happens in Mercury, no matter what sign you have it in. Okay, so the 6th house, that's where Virgo lives, since it's the 6th zodiac sign. It represents duties and responsibilities, is most often what you hear. I think that boils down, though, into daily routines and choices. So the way that you get out of bed in the morning, what do you do first? What do you do second? What does your day consist of on a regular basis? That's a 6th house, the choices that you're making kind of situation. Skills that aren't purely instinctual. So we talked about that. It's necessary, even though it's boring. So think about, like, your house needs cleaned and you live alone and nobody's coming to do it for you. Like, eventually you're going to get sick of looking at the sink full of dishes, or, you know, the crumbs on the floor, whatever it is, and eventually you clean it up. So it's like that. It's like going to the dentist because you should, or getting your tetanus shot so that you don't die of tetanus. Like, it's the routine things where you're making a choice to either take care of yourself or not. And that is how it gets its reputation for health, which I think is, yeah, we're going to do a whole slide on that. So I'll leave that there for just a second. The 6th house, like, think about how you feel on Monday morning, and that can tell you a lot about how in balance you are with your 6th house. If on Monday morning you're excited to get up and go to work, and even if your Monday isn't really on Monday, like, you get what I mean, like the start of your week. If you're excited to go to work, you're in balance with your 6th house. If you experience the Sunday scaries and Monday morning is a dreaded time in your week, week after week after week, you're not in balance with your 6th house. There's something wrong in the choices that you're making on a daily basis. And that's good to know, you know, like, it's good to know that we should wake up on Monday morning, or any morning for that matter, and be excited to get up and live our lives today. And if you're not, then chances are you're not living out the 6th house that you came to demonstrate. You're following society's cookie cutter recipe, and there are some fine tuning that you could do to get more in alignment with who you came to be. Real quick, to separate the 10th and the 6th, we'll cover the 10th at the end when we get through Capricorn, but they're both pertaining to work, but they're very different. So the 10th house is how you're perceived by the world for the work that you do. And the 6th house is the practical reality of doing the work that you've chosen. So the example he used was like being a novelist. You know, the world knows you through your books. They go to the books page on your website and they see, like, this is who you are because you wrote these books. But as a writer, you wake up on Monday morning, you probably don't change out of your sweatpants. You make a pot of coffee, you drink the pot of coffee, and you try not to get distracted. You see if you can crank out a page or two today. And, like, that's the actual reality of living that work. So it's two very different things, like the reputation your work garners you and the actual act of getting up in the morning and doing that work. And that's where, again, like, would you want to be a millionaire by being a mafia hitman? It's like, yeah, you want the status of being a millionaire, but your 6th house isn't willing to show up and do the job to get to that reputation. So the 6th house is a really important one to have in balance for reasons that we will cover shortly. The key is to finding work that lights you up and mentors that help you get there. And the 6th house planets that you have can teach you a lot about the mentors that you're looking for. If you don't have a 6th house planet, then look to the sign that is on the 6th house cusp for more information about, like the skills that you're here to learn and the types of mentors that can help you learn them. So he talks, like I said, he goes on and on about mentoring and lineage, and he uses the example of aunts and uncles and how back in the day when we lived close to our family, how your actual aunts and uncles played such a important role in your upbringing, where these were adults that you probably had a more casual relationship with than your parents, but they're still adults, they still love you, so it's still a safe space to talk about important things. Like how he says, promise you won't tell my mother. But so somebody that you can confide in and help you figure out how to be in the world, but like your parent, that's a much tenser relationship typically. So boys learning to be men, girls learning to be women, he's putting forth that this happens through this act of mentoring, whether these people are your biological aunts and uncles or just adults who were present in your life while you were coming up. And probably when you really think about it in that context, like anybody who had answers to your questions, even if that was like coming together with them for them to mentor you in one conversation only, probably we've all had lots of mentors. And I think about too, in today's digital age, how many mentors I have on YouTube that like I expose myself to them and their ideas on a regular basis, and I absorb their knowledge and their teachings, and I let them mentor me by exposing myself to them, but they have no idea who I am. So the act of being influenced on purpose by someone else mentors. So we all probably have a long list of people that have played that role in our lives. And health or illness is another thing that is frequently associated with the sixth house. And that's another area where I've had quite a few people come to me for readings with the questions of wanting greater health in their lives, or they're struggling with a chronic illness or something like that. And he says exactly what I want to say, which is I'm not a medical astrologer at all, or a medical intuitive. And the Hippocratic oath of do no harm applies to me, whether I am a doctor or not. And I don't even want to go there as far as like trying to interpret how you might increase your health with your sixth house. He recommended these two books, Astrological Timing of Critical Illness and A Handbook of Medical Astrology, if you're interested in a deeper look at how the sixth house relates to illness and health. But basically, he did boil it down, and I totally agree with this, is health is a balance of body, mind, and spirit. So it's not so much getting healthy, it's recognizing where the imbalance is in your body, your mind, or your spirit, and correcting the imbalance. And once there's balance, health is imminent, it's inevitable, it's natural that we be healthy. And if there's an ongoing illness, chances are body, mind, or spirit, one of them or more of them is not in balance. There's a thorn stuck in your paw somewhere that needs pulled out. And when that's pulled out, when that root cause is fixed, health resumes naturally. So I took it one step further of boiling down body, mind, and spirit into movement, outlook, and meaning, because those are the things that those people that have gotten themselves caught in a chronic illness, a lot of times like they end up lacking meaning because they can't work or they're on extended bed rest or whatever, and now they have a lack of meaning in their life. And it's like once you get to that point, getting healthy, it can be difficult. It's understandable why lots of people go through long-term illnesses, because once you're there, getting these three things back in balance can be challenging. And so obviously, like the best medicine is proactive balance, right? Like investing in our balance every day on purpose as like a health savings account energetically, that, you know, the health just takes care of itself because we're maintaining balance of mind, balance of spirit, balance of body. That's my 2 cents on it anyway. Okay, so Capricorn, which I think, yep, we are still doing good on time. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn and occupies the 10th house. So we will go through each of those. Okay, so Capricorn is it's an enigma. It's a tough one. It's another one that gets a really bad rap. And I am going to tell, it's a spoiler alert, it's deeper than that. It's not as negative as what pop astrology would have you believe. But we're going to start with the negative side, where Capricorn happens during the winter, if you live in the Northern Hemisphere. And so the similarities between Capricorn and Winter are, it's a long list, basically all of these of difficulty, challenge, commitment, a test of survival. Like you said, winter is endless. Like it's, if you're in the middle of it with no food, the planet is not going to just magically stop winter because you are suffering. Winter goes on and on and on as long as it will. And it's our job to make sure that we have the resources that we need to make it through. In today's day and age, obviously, it's not so much a test of survival, but back in the day when people mostly farmed their food and ate their food, the idea of canning and making sure your root cellar was full and that you had enough food to get you and all your family through the winter without producing any more, that was like a real mental process that happened, that you had to be able to do what you needed to do to survive hard times. And that is the quintessential what Capricorn is about. Survival of the fittest is not necessarily the strongest or the biggest or the fastest. It's the person who is the most willing to do what it takes in order to survive. So all the physical strength in the world won't save you if all the food you have to eat is some moldy cheese and you're not willing to eat the moldy cheese, you're dead, right? So like, are you willing to do what it takes to survive? That is like your Capricorn archetype. Stranded with not enough beans. That was a story that he told where like basically the guy was stranded in a cabin and he had 96 cans of beans and 150 days until he was going to be able to get out of there. And I mean, what do? Do you eat till you're full like every day for the first month and a half and then you have no food for another few months? Or do you starve yourself for 5 months and survive? Or do you satiate yourself for a little while and then die of hunger? So obviously the 5-month starvation is the harder path to walk, but it's the one where you survive. So it's like that. It's Capricorn is where we have to make some really difficult decisions. It's a very, very uncomfortable energy to be in. It's actually the energy that helps us do what we don't feel like doing. That says a lot about it. Better safe than sorry will save your life. Taking risks eventually kills you. That's like heavy Capricorn energy. So Capricorn is like the definition of stability and reliability and practicality and like extremely risk averse. Not willing to take a risk at all unless the result is guaranteed. If you cut corners, the corners will cut you. If you have heavy Capricorn energy, he's saying that you're not allowed to cut corners in this life. And he gave several examples. One of them was Richard Nixon, who is a solar Capricorn, and trying to cut corners thinking he could get away with something, and it doesn't work like that. The universe will shine a light on the corners that you're cutting and it will all come back to, all those chickens come back to roost, or whatever that saying is. Capricorn is represented by the sea goat, which is total mastery of the physical plane. So the sea goat is like part fish and part mountain goat, meaning it can climb the highest mountain and it can swim to the deepest depths. So there's no earth terrain that Capricorn cannot be successful on. And that's the gist of it. That's the symbolism. Obviously, there aren't real sea goats, but that's the essential ability of Capricorn, is to succeed in the physical realm. Through doggedness and persistence. Capricorn is like the ability to be single-minded on what you've set your sights on. And that's where it comes back to Taurus and being really clear on what your animal instinct has told you is the right path for you. Because Capricorn can kick its own ass every day, all day long, and can meet whatever goal is in front of it. But if it's set the wrong goal, it won't be happy or satisfied when it finally gets there. So Capricorn all by itself is simply the art of persevering. So Taurus is still dependent on to tell us like what is the right direction to go. So he included this Thomas Edison quote, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. So like if I had to put this into Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn language, Taurus is this 1% genius that shows us our direction. And Virgo and Capricorn are this 99% perspiration actually making it happen in the real world. And if you think about it, like Taurus all by itself then is an inspiration that never gets out of bed. Virgo and Capricorn are the two that really make it happen in the physical. This is a poem that I had never heard of, but that he included, The Fascination of What's Difficult. I genuinely think Capricorn as an archetype, it loves hard work. It wants to work hard for the sake of saying it worked hard and enjoying its own hard work and effort. And so that's why, like the example earlier, where I look at a pile of work and I delegate it all immediately, Capricorn Mercury looks at a pile of work and is like, okay, how am I personally going to get this done? And so I think they genuinely like it to be complicated. They genuinely like it to be difficult, so that when they get to the end, they have a sense of pride of like, it's not an easy mountain to climb. If you climb an easy mountain, where's the pride in that? They climbed a hard mountain. They like hang their hat almost on how hard things are. So that's part of that Capricorn shadow, is not getting sucked into wanting to prove yourself through living out hard experiences, like letting yourself suffer on purpose just to prove how tough you are. There's really no glory in that. Capricorn's ability to do hard things is obviously necessary, but getting sucked into that as a way to prove yourself, not super productive. Monumental effort and ambition versus human realities and limitations. So you want to climb this mountain, but your human vessel has to stop for rest, has to stop for relieving your bladder, has to eat food, has to drink water. Like there are human limitations that Capricorn as an energy, as an archetype, is not even aware of the human limitations. That's Taurus's realm. Being able to hear what your body is saying to you is something that Taurus does. So when you switch back to that inner stillness, you can hear what your body's saying to you. When you're in your Capricorn energy, you climb up the mountain until you physically fall over and probably die from exhaustion, from like exposure to the elements, to like frostbite. I mean, Capricorn just keeps going, whether it's good for you or not. And that's the shadow of Capricorn, is it will get you killed if you don't balance it with the actual like practicality of keeping your physical body alive, which is Taurus's job. So again, they all fit together. They have their own practical reasons. And when we get caught up in any one of them, the balance of our whole self gets thrown off. So like one example, which I fall into all the time, thank you to my Capricorn energy, is forgetting to eat or drink water because you're working. Like you're doing what you do and you realize it's been 10 hours since you had anything to eat or water to drink. And you didn't even notice because you were focused on what you were accomplishing. So Capricorn, like the antidote to that is remembering to carve out time for recreation. Capricorn is so single-mindedly focused on meeting the goal and leaving a legacy that they're not playing very often. They're not basking in the sun and taking luxurious naps and going on nice vacations. Capricorn is working. And again, that's very powerful for accomplishing something in the earth realm, but it will kill you if you don't leave it in balance with everything else that is also wanting to have its time in your consciousness. We're not meant to kind of hole up in any one of the zodiac energies and just stay there. If we stay too long in Capricorn, we experience collapse, and that collapse happens on many levels. The first is physical collapse. Actually, I won't say first. These are in no particular order. I think physical would be the end, but contemplate that later. Anyways, so like that would be literally not eating, not sleeping, not resting, just go, 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 go until your body physically can't move anymore and you fall over. collapse of like we said, genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. If you lose that 1%, if you like no longer have connection to your animal instincts or the reasons why you're wanting to climb this mountain, now you're just going through the motions of your responsibilities, of all the things that you've hung on yourself. An unguided missile is like the moral collapse side of it. Like you're so goal oriented that you've lost track of why are you really doing it. You're willing to succeed at any cost, even if that means taking advantage of other people. There are a lot of downsides to leaving your Capricorn energy unchecked. It is a powerful tool, and it will destruct things if you don't have it anchored into your Taurus and your animal instincts, your soul's voice of what it is that you're wanting to point yourself towards. The answer is grounding in self-care, which is another thing that Capricorn has a very hard time taking time out of their busy work schedule to fit in self-care. It's like, I don't have time for that. I have work to do. Well, like the self-care is like an investment that lets you continue to do your work and hopefully keeps you from collapsing in the long run. Which if you think about it, like if you go until you keel over dead, I mean, how much impact and effort and what's the word I'm looking for? Impact, I guess. Like, could you have made if you had taken care of yourself and maybe made a slower, more steady impact, but your life was 4 decades longer because you took good care of yourself? Like, which impact is bigger? And I think, you know, if you can really zoom out like that, taking good care of yourself does make a bigger impact in the long run, which is something Capricorn should be able to get on board with. So like that most important question of which mountain in the world is yours, and make sure you're climbing the right mountain. Capricorn is also the energy that allows us to resist temptation. So like I said, it's like the energy that helps us do what we don't feel like doing, the epitome of self-control. And this is where we get also back to the shadow. If we've lost control of ourself, we redirect the need to control onto others. So if control is something that you've ever battled with yourself, and people tell you you're controlling, or you witness it in yourself, or you find yourself being controlled a lot of the times and you don't like that, there is likely something going on in your Capricorn energy that is wanting to teach you something about having control over yourself, which is interesting because, again, having control over yourself, I would say, is a Taurus thing. Having peace inside of yourself, finding your state of balance such that you can feel peaceful on the inside. I think that's being in control of yourself. And then when it's time, kind of like Virgo, like when it's time to kick it into high gear and buckle down and work and meet the deadline or meet the goal or whatever it is, do that and use that Capricorn energy. But we're really not meant to live there all day, every day for the rest of our lives. It's really not sustainable to do that. Okay, so Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn. And again, these are going to sound a lot alike, but they are different. So Saturn as an archetype is the elder, which, again, if we go back to wisdom foot, peace foot, how do people become elders in that sense of the word? It's through trials and life experiences and lessons learned. And he said, like, you know, there are third graders out there on playgrounds all over the world who are the elders on their playground. So elder really has nothing to do with age. It's a perspective, and it's other people recognizing the wisdom inside of you. So that's a relative experience. So Saturn, though, is like basically shining a light on what lessons did you come here to learn, and what are you wanting to be an elder in? And being an elder was the ultimate goal, but in order to get that wisdom, that kind of lays out, here are the life experiences that you're likely to follow in order to build that wisdom so that you can be the elder, the what that you want it to be. It's also called the Greater Malefic, which stands for bad doer. Mars is the smaller malefic. I forget what the word is for Mars, but basically it's that Saturn is a bad guy. He's mean to us and he will mess up our lives real quick. And I gotta say, from everything that I've studied, it's more like Saturn is, here's an analogy. It's like when I was smaller, we lived on a busy highway. So my parents, they buried one of those wires in the ground, and then the dog wore a collar that, like, when it got close to the wire, it beeped. And when it went over the wire, it buzzed the dog so that she would stay off the highway. And I don't know how I feel about all that now, but Saturn's kind of like that wire collar combo of, like, when you are going out of bounds, Saturn will make sure that it hurts you. You're not supposed to go out of bounds. You came here for a reason. You came here to learn these lessons and become this elder. And when you're over here, not paying attention to your lessons, not learning what you came to learn, not doing the work you came to do, it hurts. So Saturn takes away relationships. Saturn gets us fired from our jobs. Saturn messes up our life when we are headed in the wrong direction. So it's never Saturn just like randomly wanting to cause us pain. It's like when you are going out of bounds, Saturn will make sure you feel it. So that's something that, like, Saturn is another one that gets a bad rap, but it's really helping us. In terms of, like, the different sides of the diamond, the different archetypes, Saturn is how we feel self-respect. And hang on just a second. Hey, no, not right now. They're wrestling. Saturn is how we feel self-respect. It's our character. It's our moral integrity. It's our ability to have a set of values and live out those values. And the more that we do that, the more we respect ourselves, the more we're grounded in our character, which is to say we know our own goodness. Like I said, it gives us the ability to do what we don't feel like doing. Like when things need to be done, there's a deadline, or, you know, your car's tag registration's expiring in a couple of days. So you got to go do it, whether you want to or not. It's like that ability to just buckle down and do what needs done. It's a self-preserving hesitation. It's our actual structure for resisting temptation. So you think about, like, if you have a weak Saturn or you have hard aspects to your Saturn, maybe you're not that good at resisting temptation because Saturn is our structure for doing that. So that can be telling, where if you're really not wired to resist temptation, like you're bad at it, maybe your soul's path comes from you giving in to temptation, you know, and instead of beating up on yourself, loving yourself and letting yourself go with your temptation, maybe that is the soul's path that you intended. So understanding and trying to love those things instead of beating up on ourselves, that's always the goal with studying these archetypes. Doing the right thing despite how difficult or uncomfortable it is. So going back to the example of you're stranded for 5 months and you only have 3 months worth of food. Doing the right thing is starving for 5 months and gradually giving yourself those little rations of food. It's going to be really uncomfortable for a really long time. You could shave some time off that discomfort by eating until you're full, but that's probably a recipe for killing yourself in the long run. So Saturn is where we're able to get really real about what does it take to actually survive and persevere. Because you go back to the elder or the father, Saturn, like, had a reason. Saturn has an evolutionary purpose for wanting to come into this life. And so Saturn has a vested interest in you surviving. And Saturn is always going to, like, pull the reins back, pump the brake pedal, and make sure that you're making decisions that are going to promote your survival and not hinder it. So Saturn in and of itself, not a super sexy planet, but very, very important for balancing, like, what we actually came here to do. And there is part of us that loves to clean the house. So this example, he's like, you know, your house needs cleaned and you spend 4 hours and it actually ends up kind of flying by because you're so engaged and you're just kind of going from one thing to the next and you don't even realize that it's been 4 hours. And then at the end, you sit down and you look around at your clean house and you feel that sense of accomplishment. that you did this and it looks really nice and you're proud that it's clean and it's nice to be in the clean environment, there is really a part of us that loves to do the hard things that need to be done. There's a satisfaction mechanism inside of us that gives us what we need in order to do things that have very little extrinsic reward, if that's even a word, I don't know. But like cleaning your house, like who's benefiting from that? Nobody's paying you, nobody's going to throw you a parade, but you get to enjoy it and it's nice for you. And so Saturn is like the payoff for doing those kinds of hard things. This is kind of funny. Some people don't enjoy vacation, and these people most likely have strong Saturn placements in their charts, because Saturn is miserable in slow-paced nothingness. Saturn wants to work hard. It's our mechanism for being able to work hard. So if you intentionally take a 7-day vacation, Saturn is like straight up miserable. So that's like good to be aware of. I had this couple in front of me one time, and she was going at him about why he couldn't just relax on vacation. And turns out Saturn and a couple other things were accounting for he's bored. He's bored out of his mind. Like he doesn't want to just sit there and do nothing. He wants to be engaged and be doing things. And she didn't. She wanted the sit there, do nothing vacation experience, and he didn't. So figuring that out, how does husband and wife vacation together if they want completely different experiences? Learning their archetypes let them each understand like who they both were individually. And basically the answer was, you got to carve out individual time. He wants to go to the museum and read all the plaques and, you know, walk on this tour and go learn this thing and all these. And she wants to lay by the pool for 5 days, and he can't stand to do that. So you're going to have to just go your own ways if you're both going to enjoy your vacation. So that's like one side of like, how easy is it for you to relax? If you feel like you chronically can't relax, chances are there's some kind of something going on with your Saturn. Depression in Saturn's world comes from a lack of meaningful choices. So if you are pointing yourself towards not your mountain, if you're spending your days doing things that don't really matter to you, you're expending all this effort working so hard and there's really no payoff, no benefit that you can see, that's going to be depressing. So if you ever do struggle with depression, which has been something I've spent a lot of time with, it's like there are so many different flavors of depression, and it really does point back to what is the root cause. Because if that's the kind of depression you're in, changing jobs or finding a volunteer gig that feeds your soul, that feels meaningful to you, or whatever the case is, switching up your day-to-day life experience and finding something to incorporate that does feel meaningful would ease your depression. So, you know, again, I'm not a trained professional. I cannot take the place of like true psychology and people who need medications to function. Not saying anything about that, but there is a lot of depressed people out there that can make lifestyle choices and feel better. So, you know, I personally am a big fan of trying those things before resorting to medication, but that's again, just my 2 cents. Some phrase that I've heard for Saturn that I really love is invest in your Saturn and it invests back into you. Because again, this is like the point of what we were coming for. Like this is the skill that we came to be an elder at. If we spend time working on that, life opens up for us in a way that's like when we agree to step onto the path, the steps of the path just keep coming. So you really do have to turn into it though. And Saturn by definition is the place where we really don't feel like working, but we will if we have to, and we can get it done if we have to. So it's usually not something that we come to willingly before our first Saturn return, which happens at the end of our 20s. That's usually when we get serious and we, you know, point ourselves towards what it is that we really want to do in this lifetime. Some people don't even get it during the first Saturn return. They more see it in their mid to late 50s, where again, Saturn comes back around and is like, are you doing what you came here to do? And if the answer is no, it's a very turbulent time of getting readjusted and realigned towards your Saturn purpose. But if you are willing and you are leaning into it, it's really not like ripping away things that matter to you, because you are moving in that right direction. The last way that he put it, and this was, I put it at the end so that we could minimize it, because I don't want to communicate that Saturn is a bad thing. But, you know, like the elder and gaining wisdom, and how that's going to take us through some trials and some hard experiences, probably. Saturn basically points to what is the blockage that you're here to work through. It is one dimension of coming to the great work of your life, is working through that blockage. And the steps are, as he outlines here, is to take responsibility for it, to see that you are the common denominator in this thread of experiences where you are not getting what you want. You realize I'm the one that's constant here, and you recognize that the blockage is actually inside of you. And then it's a matter of sustained effort over time, which is always something that comes with Saturn. It's a lifetime activity, not something where like, okay, spend a year working on it and then you'll be good to go. No, it's going to be chip away at it like one little bit at a time for the rest of your life, but get better and better and better and better. And as you do, it gives birth to organic self-respect and grounded happiness, that the more you work through that blockage, the more happiness just comes naturally, because again, that blockage is something that you decided to let go of. Going back to like the reincarnation side of things, your Saturn placement tells you a blockage that you recognized inside of yourself. This is kind of in between lifetimes, a blockage you recognized, and that you said, I said, we said, I'm no longer willing to let that block me anymore from what I want. And so you came with that Saturn placement, and the first thing it's going to do is block you, because you have the blockage inside of yourself. So life continually pops up and blocks you in this area. And as that becomes frustrating enough, we eventually turn inward, take responsibility for it, and we can start chipping away at that blockage at that point. So taking ownership of your Saturn placement, like, it's such a blessing in the long run, like in the end, but it represents hard work, consistent, sustained hard work over time, and the value and benefit that can come from that if we're willing to put it in. So because we're talking about our karmic past, right? Like this blockage that we came to work through, we already had it before we ever were born into this lifetime. So it can point to an unresolved issue, a fearful circumstance or failure. Like basically something bad happened, and in this life, you're worried that that same bad thing is going to happen to you again. And so that is the block, the fear that this thing could happen to me. And then you block things from coming because you're afraid that it's going to hurt you. And he basically, like, you're subconsciously worried. Like you may not even understand like where this fear comes from or where this anxiety comes from, but deep down from your past lives, there's fear that like you were hurt before and you don't want to get hurt again. That's where he says once burned, twice smart. It's that like there is the actual pain of the event which happened in the last lifetime, but what we carry over into this lifetime is the paranoia around re-experiencing that fear. And so this, we've committed to ourselves by coming back again, that this life, we are no longer going to be limited by this blockage, that we are here to work it out this time. And to, when we reemerge back into non-physical at the end of this life, the blockage won't be there, ideally, right? We should make progress towards removing it. The punishment that, like the greater malefic, Saturn being the bad doer, the punishment that comes is when we are blind and numb and not taking ownership of the part that's inside of ourselves that is attracting the punishment. Like we're blaming it on other people. We're saying that they're the bad guy, they're the ones that aren't trustworthy, they're blah, 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 blah. And that's why I'm limited. That's why I'm blocked off. And then Saturn comes through and is like, oh, really? It's the job's fault? How about we get you fired from that job so you can see that it had nothing to do with the job, because you still feel blocked even now without that. So Saturn is going to prove the point to us whether we like it or not. And the more we try to close our eyes and deny that that blockage is there, the louder Saturn has to get with the life experiences that are trying to show you the blockage inside of yourself. He gave some examples about like kicking addiction. Like he worked with this lady who was addicted to heroin, and he was kind of with her through that process, acknowledging that like he can't do anything for her other than to be there with her. Like if she's going to quit heroin, she's going to have to do it herself, because that is something that's going to come from inside of her. And so doing that, or changing any bad habits for that matter, is mastering your Saturn, because that Saturn is representing self-discipline and self-control. So if there are things in your life that are eluding you, the answer is likely in your Saturn. And as I'm saying this out loud, I realize I have been struggling with binge eating like my whole life. And lately I'm so aware of it, and yet like while I'm eating, I'm like, why am I doing this? Why? But I can't stop. And so like I got to look at my Saturn. I'll have to dive deeper into it, because there are literally times where I feel like I can't control myself. And so the ability to control yourself or not, like it can take lots of different forms, whatever that behavior is. Like, but yeah, it's Saturn is an interesting one. Anyways, I'll digress there. The 12th step of AA, which I didn't know, but he shared in the book, is commit to help others who have suffered the same thing. And I love this in the Earth family in general. Like we heard about it in Virgo with the mentorship, and now with Saturn with like you master something and then basically pay it forward. Like our job isn't just to get better ourselves. Our job is to have ripple effects here in the world. And this is just one more place where Saturn is showing us the blockage that we're facing, and we can chip away at our own blockage, but then we can also help other people who are experiencing a similar blockage. Not that we can do it for them, but we sure can shine a light on their path while they're trying to walk it. 10th house, and I think this is the last piece, which is good. This is, oh, we're just slightly over time. So the 10th house, we talked just a second ago about the 10th house and the 6th house, the 10th house being the way we're perceived by the world for the work that we do. So he also describes, like a lot of times it's called the house of our career, but really it's deeper than that. It's not just our career, it's our mission. It's like what we came into the world to do for the world. Like we had something in mind. And again, it could be, you know, if your midheaven is in Cancer, your 10th house is in Cancer, maybe your impact in the world was having kids and raising them and being a stay-at-home mom. Like that's a very valid use of you being here in the greater scheme of things. Maybe you're Elon Musk or the guy who Jeff Bezos, like maybe you're here to impact like literally the whole entire world. I don't know. Like it's kind of all wrapped up in your 10th house. Other ways to describe it, it's our honor, which is like internal, it's intrinsic. It's based on kind of proving to ourselves that we have professional value. And like at a dinner party or a first job interview, something like that, somebody that doesn't know you and they're trying to make sense of you, a lot of times the first question is, what do you do? Because there's a lot that we can suss out from that question of like, what is your status? What's your hierarchical rank? How much money do you have? You can learn a lot just by understanding somebody's job. All of that is completely surface level. None of that has to do with who they are as a deeper human being, but that is what the 10th house is about. So whether you want to be judged like that or not, the 10th house is where that happens regardless. It's how the world sees you. So like I've seen, oh gosh, who was that? Doesn't matter. It was a famous person who like had a hard transit to their 10th house, and like their whole career fell apart, and like they're a public figure. So this career type failure is now playing out on this very public stage, where again, the world is interpreting what they think they know about the situation, which has nothing to do with who the person really is deep down. The 10th house also relates somewhat to money, but it's not so much driven towards money for money's sake. It more wants the money as a reward for its great work. So it doesn't just want to win the lottery and be a millionaire. It wants to write a novel and sell 1 million copies. It wants to do something important and be paid for that, as it should be. I thought this was really, really good. A curse to put on your worst enemy is, may you have a job that only pays you in money. And that is like, again, the epitome of the 12th house or the 10th house is like, what are you here to do? Because it's not all about money, it's about meaning and what you're leaving behind when you're done with this incarnation of your soul. Meaningful work meets a real need in the world, offering a gift to the community. So that's kind of a definition. So again, making money for money's sake doesn't really meet a need in the world unless you're doing something meaningful with those funds. So kind of focusing your 10th house mindset on what is the value that you're trying to create in the world, not necessarily how do I want to be perceived or how much money do I want to make, how do I want to be remembered. What is the actual value that, like, by the end of your lifetime you want this value to exist in the world, and then just focus on creating that and let the world make sense of it however they're going to, because they're not going to understand no matter how much you try to get them to. So the 10th house, if you don't have planets in the 10th house, that's no problem. We all have a midheaven, or the MC line, that points to the beginning of your 10th house. And those midheaven sign and the planets, if you have them, point towards your unique space in the community. So obviously, each sign can take a million different faces or options. And our mission is not always a job. So this wasn't Stephen's example, but there's this story that has always stood out to me. This guy that went to live on an island back in like the late 70s, and every day he plants trees. That's all he does, is he plants trees on this island, and he's planted like, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of trees, and that he's devoted his life to planting trees on this island, and that's what he's doing. And I mean, for decades, he did that with the world not even knowing anything about it. So that is, I think, the epitome of our 10th house mission, is like, what is the actual value that you want to create? And think about like how many people create value in this world that isn't recognized until well after their passing. So again, being hung up on what our reputation is or how we're interpreted, we can miss the point of like, what is the actual mission that you're here to accomplish? This one, planets in the 10th house, you are ready to have an impact on the structures of society. And when you get your mission right, it helps other people too. So those 10th house planets, like, they're basically a guarantee that you will have an impact on the lives of other people. And chances are, like, that's probably scary. Like, if you're a person with planets in the 10th house and like you're being guaranteed that you're going to have an impact, you probably don't take that lightly. Hopefully not. So yeah, that's, again, good to understand. And then a function in the psyche that you must develop so your mission can find you is, when the flower opens, you don't need to look for bees. That's like a, ancient saying or whatever. But basically what he's saying is like, the flower just blooms. The flower doesn't worry about, how do I put out a marketing plan so that all the bees can find me, and I'll have a release date and we'll do a grand opening. And the flower just does its thing. And the bees and the whole of the world around it does its thing and takes what it needs from the flower. So even though the 10th house is very much about the value that we add into the world, it always comes back to our internal reason of why, which loops us all the way back to Taurus and our animal instincts and being in our inner quiet so that we can hear what is the direction that we're meant to walk. Slender threads lead us onward. This is basically saying, like, when we're talking about the 10th house and the legacy and the value that you're creating, it's not anything that's going to be like an overnight success. It's going to be something that takes your whole life basically to accomplish. And he used the example of Mercury in the 10th house, where Mercury is our learning and our thinking and talking and communication. There was this little girl, and she's got her Mercury in the 10th house, and she was always very social and bubbly and could talk to anybody. Very good student. Fast forward to her high school, she's the valedictorian because she's such a dedicated student. She gives the speech, which is very polished, and has her peers looking at her like, oh wow, like she's got this skill. She goes on to major in education. She starts teaching in the elementary school. After a couple years of that, she wants more challenge. So she moves to teaching high school students. And a couple years of that, she wants more. So she starts her PhD in English literature, eventually becomes a college professor, eventually writes her own novel, which boosts her career and moves her to a more prestigious university where she writes more novels. Eventually she retires to just be a novelist and publishes like 12 more books. So that's like Mercury in the 10th house. Like it started when she was a little girl, and every single step along the way was a necessary piece of eventually getting her to publish however many books that she did in her lifetime, which makes sense with Mercury communication being in your 10th house of making an impact on people, putting books into the world. Like that makes a lot of sense. But it wasn't just, oh, here, let me write a book. I mean, she went through all of these different steps along the way that prepared her for that path. So slender threads lead us forward. That was a fun contemplative exercise to see how my own threads have led me forward, how this experience got me ready for this experience, which got me ready for this experience. So yeah, it's fun to see how it all had its reason. So that is my mammoth of an Earth Energy deep dive presentation. I will leave you with one final recommendation for Stephen Forrest's books on the different elements. His website is stephenforrestastrology.com. This video will also be up on my YouTube channel, which I left a link for in the meetup event. So if you haven't subscribed to that, I do release new videos every day on lots of different subjects. And I am good as far as like hanging out for a few more minutes. If there are any questions at all, I am happy to answer those now. And if you guys don't have any questions, we are done here and you are welcome to hop off anytime. Thank you for bearing with me. I cannot believe you guys sat through that. That's amazing. Aiden, did you have a question? Nope. Okay. You're so welcome. Yeah,
No, thank you.
Kind of reading your lips there. Yeah, you are so welcome. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it.
Sure, I did. Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I do one free event a month thereabouts, and I do already think that the next one of these is going to be on the Book of Fire. So Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, and all of the things associated with that, basically in a similar format. Also based on Stephen Forrest's Book of Fire. So that's what's coming next. That'll be around the end of November, early December. Very good. Well, thank you guys. I'm gonna log off and I will hopefully see you all very soon. I'm gonna actually, one more thing. I am going to pop a couple things into the chat. So that is my website, owningauthenticity.com. You can also reach me at owningauthenticity@gmail.com. I'm also on Instagram under Owning Authenticity. And I also do one-on-one sessions. So I offer individual sessions if needed, but my real joy is offering packages of sessions where I work with people for at least a few times, couple months, and we dig into their natal chart one piece at a time. So going deep into understanding each of the different planets, what sign it's in, what house it's in, the conversation it's having with the rest of the chart, and really work to understand like the unique soul that each person came to be. So that is one of the things that I am very passionate about, is getting to work one-on-one with people. So if ever that sounds like something you would be interested in, you can email me or learn a little bit more on my website. Moon, did you have a question? All good, it seems. Okay, well, you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Oh, Moon, did you?
Sorry, Carly, can you go back one slide? The
Mhm.
last slide, could you possibly put that back on?
Sure.
The one right before the books. So
This
your official last slide right before the books.
This one?
Uh-huh.
Yes. No.
Right before the books, the 37. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted to just take that in. Thank you. This was an amazing presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So meaty, very, very
Well,
dense.
and I can't even, I mean, that gives you some idea of how much I had to leave out because that book is like 18 hours long. And I feel like in these 2 hours, I barely did it justice. But we can't sit here for 18 hours. My voice has already had just about enough for one day. But no, this was an absolute joy. I personally took a while to get into earth energy because I thought it was boring. But now I see how it is like one of the most important pieces to like truly doing what our soul came here to do, is getting our earth energy in balance.
Yes, and I can speak from experience in all three of these earth energy signs. I just happen to have them active, but I got sort of reassigned into more Taurus in the last 8 years.
Mhm.
That it's appearing to me that maybe the earth signs are more of those who are assigned to helping to bring new earth.
Yeah.
The embodying of these tasks that are being doled out, or rather that are coming online, more in the last 10 to 12 years, and that current are on the shoulders of, so
Totally.
because the visioning and the visionary signs, like, I think Sag and other ones, we're doing that prior, but now we're in the feet on the ground, sort of like part of
Yeah.
it. So that's just some perspective that I'm noticing.
Totally. And I think if we have lots of earth planets in our chart, we're definitely here to make our mark. And even if you don't have planets in earth, like he says, you still have Saturn somewhere in your chart, even if it's not in an earth sign. You still have Mercury and Venus, even if they're not in earth signs. So we all have the potential to make some kind of impact on this world, be it positive or negative. But yes, I agree. Like the more earth energy you have in your chart, the more like you are going to have to do something in the physical realm if you're going to want to, or if you want to be satisfied. Like if you want your soul to be fulfilled with what it did during your life, you're going to have to make some some visible efforts in the real world. Like I have a Capricorn midheaven, and building an empire, having businesses, releasing books, having YouTube content, like putting tangible things out into the world is something that like basically every day it's at the front of my brain is I need to do that. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of power in orienting ourselves towards what is the mountain that you came to climb, like letting it all get in harmony and pointing your earth energy in a direction that like actually matters to you. um, that's where, like I said, Taurus took me so long to get on board with, but that's where it all starts. Like without your Taurus, without your inner silence, you can't know that you're headed in the right direction. And at that point, yeah, you can't know if your soul is ever going to be satisfied on your path. So I was definitely missing something in my inner balance before I was working consciously with my Taurus energy. Anything else before we tap out here? Okay. Okay, then. Well, as soon as I have the recording up on the YouTube channel, I will put the link in the meetup event. Otherwise, here in the next couple weeks, I should have the next one of these on the calendar, which you are all, of course, invited to. So thank you again so much for joining me for this, and I hope it was beneficial. And I hope to see you again on the next one. Until then, you take good care. Bye-bye.